Muito bem, vamos então ao próximo painel.
We will move on to the next panel, whose theme is Challenges for Global Development, Future Agendas. As moderator, the director of Finep, Financer of Studies and Projects, André Godoy. As debaters, the coordinator of the Vision 2030 report of Embrapa, Édson Bolfe. Morgan Doyle, representative of the IDB in Brazil, also representative in Brazil of the International Financial Corporation, Carlos Pinto, and Uzi Scheffer, CEO of the Corporate Open Innovation Entrepreneurship Building Tech Ecosystems. Our commentators are Nelson de Souza, President of Desenvolve São Paulo, and André Verde, President of AgeRio. With the floor, the moderator, André Godoy. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to some of you. First, I'd like to thank the audience for joining us, and then also the panel members and the commentators from ABDE, the organizers of the event, and President Sergio Schodowski, President of the institution of the ABDE. I should first point out that this is an extremely relevant topic. The role of science and technology in global development, especially in face of the changes that we were already facing, but then crises such as the pandemic accelerate processes that were already underway, and in a certain way provides further impulse and drive for change. And so the idea is to address several sectors of the economy, and we would like to discuss how this process affects our everyday lives. And so I'd like to welcome Édson Bolfe, who will talk about how this process impacts the agro sector. He represents the Embrapa, and also he's coordinator of the report Vision 2030. He will talk about open innovation. Scheffer will talk about open innovation and how this affects so many different sectors. Carlos Pinto, country manager of IFC and member of the World Bank Group, to talk about challenges and opportunities and how the institution can support and be an ally of the country. And Morgan Doyle, representing the IDB, who will talk about financial system and how this can support countries, especially Brazil. And our commentators, Nelson de Souza, President of Desenvolve São Paulo, a financial institution of the government of the state of São Paulo, and André Verde, President of the Development Agency of Rio, AgeRio, the main development institution of the government of the state of Rio de Janeiro. I'd like to ask you to pay attention to the time allocated, 10 minutes to each speaker, and commentators will have 5 minutes each for their comments, and then we will return to the panel members, who will have 2 minutes at the end for final considerations. Without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Édson for his presentation. Good morning. First, I'd like to thank ABDE for the invitation to participate in such an important forum. It's a joy to to meet my colleagues. I'd like to show you some slides which contain some figures, and I will try to limit myself to 10 minutes. I will share my screen. So the idea is to present the results of a study we conducted regarding 2030, and with a stronger focus on digital agriculture, the 4.0 agriculture, and how important it is in the context of national and global development that is more sustainable and sustained. Basically, I coordinated this process between 2015 and 2018. We have a system called AgroPensa for strategic analysis and planning of Embrapa. And this system involves not only Embrapa units, it's 46 units, but also national and international partners and analysis of studies, scenarios, and models, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Science and Technology, and other ministries involved in technological development, to generate documents and analyses. So the last document generated is Vision 2030. It is currently being reviewed by another colleague. The document relied on more than 300 national and international collaborators. Just to give you some context within the logic of global growth of population for the next few years, but specifically emphasizing growth of demand in the food sector. So an increase of 35% in relation to 2015, which is a huge challenge for all countries. Highlighting Brazilian production, we have a production of grain of around 250, 270 tons, million tons, and in meat around 28 million, and fruit 43 million tons. This represents approximately 22% of Brazilian GDP.
31% of the labor force and approximately 43% of exports. Brazilian exports are around 150 countries, feeding approximately 1 billion people. A bit more than 10% of the world's population is linked somehow with the Brazilian agriculture. When we talk about land use, there are some misunderstandings. These are figures of 2019. We have 61.5% of its territory covered by forests, and we also have non-forest natural coverage in 5.9%. So it's native cover. The agriculture and livestock raising, we have 30% coverage. Most of them are covered by agriculture. And here we can see the evolution of grain production, fruit and others. And this brown line goes from 1978 until recently in terms of planted area of grains in Brazil. It grew from 36 million hectares to 65, almost 66 million hectares in this period. As for grain production, we went from 38 million tons to 257 million tons. So we are forecasting 270 million tons for this year. So we focused on increasing productivity. These are some factors that intensified Brazilian productivity. environmental issues, climate, soils, public policies of different governments or administration, entrepreneurship in chains, rural producers and agro industries, and a specific factor is technology. Technology responds for 45% of this growth in the period. In the last years, it has responded over 60%. Analyzing scenarios, we work with megatrends, I beg your pardon. We have 7 for 2030, starting with socioeconomic change, sustainability, climate change, technological convergence, protagonism of consumers, adding value. And these megatrends were elaborated within a logic for the strategic planning of the company for a few years. The first megatrend is intensification and sustainability of productive systems. And here, what we need is sustainable expansion and systemic expansion of agriculture, greater preservation of natural resources, growth of specialized agricultural production, environmental compliance and agro and environmental services of rural properties, the reduction of food waste, growing influence of international agreements and regulatory frameworks, and expansion of incentives to productive diversity for all size production or producers. So we focus on the 2030, both for large producers, around 8,000 hectares, the size of this project, and also small producers, as you can see here on the right, 2 hectares, etc., 3 sectors. So this logic aims to reach both worlds, large ones, large producers, and small producers. So we aim to cover all sectors. Now, talking about the 4.0 agriculture or digital agriculture, what we look for is new institutional arrangements and innovation ecosystems, intense digital transformation, IoT, automation, robotization, and other contexts where we look for an association of traditional knowledge of rural producers with new technologies, IT, etc. Today, we are linked, but there is some confusion between the past and the future. So we want to fill in this gap through different areas such as technology transfer, etc. The question is how to produce more with less. So producing more food with less inputs. So we modeled some digital technologies such as softwares, apps, blockchain, encryption, AI, digital platforms, remote sensing, etc. Automation, robotics, IoT, cloud computing, social media, information systems, big data, 3D printing, machine learning, satellites, telemetry, and GPS. Based on this logic, we can model some benefits inside the links. We have this logic of input manufacturers in order to optimize natural resources, disruptive solutions, new markets, quality and safety. And in the farm, the idea is greater agricultural productivity, sustainability, new opportunities, decision-making, and rural succession, so that youth stay in rural areas. Then we have processors, we have planning, etc., adding value, reducing loss until we get to final consumers. And we can only value what we know. So urban consumers are able to know the rural areas more because of all the technologies available. So we have more transparency, engagement, etc. Here is to highlight inside the main strategic goals in the 2030 agenda, we can see some examples of applications in the digital agriculture or 4.0 agriculture. Different sectors, from the use of land, fishing, sales, trade, communication, information. And today we are able to evaluate, and we evaluate a little bit more the profile of Brazil. Last year we had a survey with over 1,000 participants, with producers, startups. 84% of producers in the survey had at least one digital technology in their productive process. These are the main ones. Internet in rural properties, and we can see 70% of these producers have internet, and we have sensors, 16%, we have other details. We also have 95% of these producers would like to have more information about digital agriculture, especially in the perspective that you're able to produce more with less, more food with less use of inputs and human and natural resources. These are some publications. We have this survey published in all these publications in FAPESP, in Globo Rural, Agroanalysis by the Getúlio Vargas Foundation. And with this, I will conclude, leaving this link where we aim to analyze the logic of 2030 of the SDGs, focusing on the future of Brazilian agriculture. I am at your service if you need anything, and I'd like to thank once again for the invitation. I am here if you'd like to ask questions. Okay, thank you, Édson, for your presentation. Important scenario of the agricultural area and the impact of technologies in our productivity. And I will give the floor now to Uzi Scheffer for his presentation. Uzi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, André. And I would like to share a presentation as well. So I'm sharing my screen now. And if you can give me an indication. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Okay, so my name is Uzi Scheffer. I'm the CEO of SOSA. We are a global open innovation company. Very briefly, our business is about working with large organizations and governments and bringing technologies to the market up to implementations. So we support companies with resilience and growth. And by doing that, we contribute to the economic growth of the regions and countries that we work with. Just a few logos here out of the few dozens of organizations we work with. So we have a partnership with CNI. I will speak about it a word. I think it's a very important one and a very good case study of what can be done. The Australian government for the 50th year, Insulab Germany, City of New York, the Basque Country, and then corporates such as, we have a few areas of expertise. So in financial services, corporates such as Swiss Re and Tokyo Marine Holding, which is the largest Japanese insurer, and Royal Bank of Canada, and industrial sector companies such as Schneider Electric, and so on. With CNI, a year ago, we launched a strategic partnership with CNI. You can see here the launch event with the president of CNI and Gianna Sagasio, director of innovation. And in 2 words, the goal of this partnership is really to bring the Brazilian industry one step closer to leading global technologies in order to help Brazilian companies not only survive, but compete, grow, and succeed on a global level. And we are very happy now, a few months into this partnership, we have 2 important projects going on, one with Natura and the other one with Klabin. And these are important names and important companies in Brazil. So in this short presentation, I will share with you findings from the CNI SOSA report that we have compiled a few months ago. And the name of so obviously in this very short presentation, I will focus on industry. Of course, we can speak about financial services and banks and so on. And agriculture, I saw the great presentation. Agriculture also has supply chain and logistics that contribute to the efficiency. So things get connected in innovation. But this report was compiled for the industrial sector. And the name of the report is Industry 4.0 COVID-19 Mode. But in fact, what we saw in the past year is that COVID didn't bring completely new trends or technologies that no one thought about, but rather accelerated the adoption process that was already there. And in this slide, you can basically see the entire report. And we broke it down into 4 verticals: infection prevention, automation and optimization, supply chain, and operational resilience. And then we further broke down the verticals into sub-verticals, and then brought specific technologies and technology companies that can help companies, corporations, manufacturers, industrial companies cope in all these sub-verticals. Everything we do is very practical. So also when we compile a report, it will always have practical information on what can you do tomorrow morning with technologies that are ready to go to the market and perhaps already working in Latin America and in Brazil. So very briefly, just to give you an idea of the findings of the report and what is going on in this space. So infection and prevention, first one, because there is, due to COVID, a very slim margin of errors. So one confirmed COVID case can shut down an entire factory. So the corporate survival is directly linked to the health and well-being of all workers. And new systems and technologies need to be adopted to ensure that workers stay healthy with a minimum interruption to the ongoing operations. And there are actually technologies and solutions that can do both. They can protect the workers and increase productivity. And if we just take one example here under mass marketing, we see a company named AnyVision. So AnyVision, they have an advanced image processing technologies that can streamline access control completely touchless. So no need to compromise on speed and efficiency if you implement the right technology. If we look at automation and optimization, so these include companies that enable industrial operations to run autonomously and efficiently. They serve clients with edge AI, autonomous inspections, additive manufacturing, analytics, and industrial robotics. And if we take just one example in this short presentation, so one fascinating company is XJet. It is listed here under additive manufacturing. They employ more than 100 specialists. They have numerous PhDs, hundreds of patents, and this company is creating 3D printers that are designed to produce metal and ceramic parts for mass production applications. This is actually one of the leading companies in the additive manufacturing arena. So implementing such kind of solutions helps build more resilient operations while lowering the dependency on global trade by enabling companies to solve immediate crucial shortages in-house. Optimization analytics tools such as Sisense, for example, here, they represent a completely different approach. So this is a solution which is purely based on software, so in many senses, much easier and faster to implement. If we look at supply chain, and just speak about it for a few minutes, then supply chain across the globe were obviously disrupted by the pandemic, starting with supply and demand shocks, followed by the inability to transport goods and leading to shortages in almost every sector, from supermarkets to construction sites and so on. And companies offering advanced AI software solutions were the ones that were able to help very quickly mitigate these disruptions and help companies leverage their existing data sets to deal with new changes. So based on analysis on their own data, companies can very easily optimize and predict more accurately every fraction of their supply chain and also learn the new consumer behavior. And I think that I'm just opening a topic, but I won't touch it too much, but I think that learning the new consumer behavior is key and a key trend in almost every sector. We see it in the financial sector, we see it in insurance. We know that the pandemic has changed very dramatically the consumer behavior, habits, and lifestyle. And this has implications on all industries. And of course, when you look at industry and logistics, so consumers today are expecting fast and efficient deliveries from nearly every supplier. And these are B2C consumers, but B2B consumers as well. Another company here named Fabric, under last mile delivery. Fabric has developed micro-fulfillment warehouses that can be assembled in the center of urban jungles. So bringing companies closer to their customers. And fourth is operational resilience. So, if there is something that all of us have learned that the pandemic has made very clear, is that the resilience of operations and business continuity cannot be taken for granted. And we find this topic of operational resilience as a very important one, and it relates to the necessity of robust safety measures to protect both digital and physical assets. A recent Interpol assessment of the impact of COVID-19 on cybercrime has shown a significant target shift from individuals and small businesses to major corporations, governments, and critical infrastructures. So with organizations rapidly deploying remote systems and connecting connectivity solutions, criminals are taking advantage, and they generate profits and cause disruption through that. So a company, just one example here, but there are numerous examples. But if we look at industrial cybersecurity, so Shield IoT is an early stage startup that developed an end-to-end solution enabling the security and management of large IoT fleets. So that's really an overview, and I invite you. You can also ask for the report or download it. I can send it to you and read through it. There is an explanation about every trend, every subsector, and every technology, and that was a brief overview on that. I wanted to complete this overview with a very brief and short overview with perhaps a financial aspect of what we see in the Industry 4.0 startups and technologies. So what you see here are investments in industry-related private companies in the US from 2017 to 2020 and Q1 of 2021. The data is from PitchBook. And interesting to see that in 2020, funding was actually on the rise in VC-backed and private equity-backed, but we see the corporate-backed funding, so the CVCs, we see them declining, which I think it makes sense. We can understand that. VC funding was on the rise from $27 billion to $33 billion. Corporate investment decreased 50% from $100 billion to $50 billion in 2020. In Q1 2021, we still see a very strong and even stronger VC investment trend, higher pace than 2020, $19 billion only in Q1 2021. So in general, we can say that this trend and the space keeps growing. I think we can all assume or understand why that the private sector and industrial companies invested less during 2020, but we also see the beginning of a correction there as well. So to conclude, I assume that everybody agrees that implementation of innovative solutions is not a nice to have, but today this is the key to help industries compete and grow. I think that one of the points here is that this is very easy to say, but it is very difficult to execute. And I know it because this is what we do as a business, and this is what we do with companies on an ongoing basis. It is primarily the task of the private sector, but the public sector can definitely play an important role in helping companies access, implement, and fund activities. And I think that the partnership and the operation that we are running now with CNI is a beautiful example on how to work together and help the private sector access all that. So thank you again for having me today at the panel, and I look forward to our discussion.
Muito obrigado, Uzi. Agradeço a apresentação. Trouxe...
Thank you, Uzi, for the presentation. You showed us important panorama of how technologies can be applied, produced and applied. Thank you for... I now give the floor to Morgan Doyle, representative of the Inter-American Bank, Development Bank, ABDE, in Brazil. Morgan, Morgan, you have the floor. Thank you, André. Good morning to all my colleagues here in this panel and all of you who are with us in this debate promoted by ABDE. Thank you for the invitation to participate. Thank you, Sergio Guzmán. And also I'd like to reinforce that ABDE is a historical partner for ADB. Well, the challenges we face are multifaceted and require collaboration. We have drastic consequences of this sanitary crisis, the economic crisis, and we also have the burden of structural burdens and problems that are exaggerated by the pandemics, especially here in our region. Over 20 million people in the region went into the poverty line last year, and the per capita income will not recover the pre-pandemic levels for several years. IADB and the cooperation community has joined this effort. IADB approved $14 billion to mitigate these effects. We also work with the private sector through it. In addition to the BID lab, we were able to leverage another $9 billion. So in total, for Brazil, $3.7 billion. But definitely, and the message I'd like to convey today is that we can and need to do more. The world is not safe until the virus is controlled globally and not locally. Until we have a local solution that is also sustainable. And countries need to join, and they cannot lose growth. The transforming trends that have been commented by my colleagues here are essential for us to leave this crisis. We have talked about the digital revolution, the recognition of climate change, financial liquidity, and returns, regional and global value chains. These are trends we need to look at and enjoy and actually tap on in order to leave this situation. We have to generate knowledge, but inclusive knowledge, inclusive development, in order for all to participate in wealth generation. This requires a dynamic public sector, requiring a green fiscal policy, the green recovery, looking at not only mitigating climate impact, but to create a productive structure that leads countries to growth and recovery. We will need to rethink the systems of social protection, including requalification of people and capacity building, the upskilling, especially youth. In addition, we need to have concrete approach to diversity. We need to look at specific challenges that affect segments of population in terms of all sides of life, such as gender and race and etc., so that people can actually make use of their full talent. So IADB developed its strategy focusing on sustainable growth for the region, reactivating productive system, promoting integration, support to SMEs, digitalization. And we are very pleased to have approved in this line a credit line for digital transformation here in Brazil for the three spheres of government and also SMEs through the national system of foment. Another objective is to promote social progress, investing in human capital and development of skills, such as social protection systems. The third is to strengthen good governance, supporting political decisions in order to attract private capital. All these objectives are committed to cross-cutting issues: gender equality, diversity, climate change. And I invite you all who are interested to visit our webpage. The next years are crucial for a new focus to promote sustainable development. And I'd like to call your attention to the role of financial institutions and development institutions. They are essential for global risks to be managed, I beg your pardon. And they are critical in order to provide swift response, as we have seen in Brazil and in other countries, being used in several social projects, maintaining income and employment. We have a long-lasting relationship with development institutions in the region. We have a very robust portfolio with over $6.6 billion leveraged. But also, it is essential that we address sustainable and green bonds. As a trend, we need to get into, and also we are very much committed to them. We have leveraged such titles in the region. It is very much underused, this market, but it has huge potential as responding impact investments in the country. They can finance several projects in health, education, etc. And one of the factors that has hindered that is the lack of information, which is essential for decision-making on the part of investors.
To bridge this gap, we are proud to share that we are today launching the Green Bond. I'm sorry, we had some problem with the sound. Yes, it's okay now. I apologize. So the Green Bond Transparency Platform that we have, Green Bond Transparency Platform, the first tool making information accessible to all interested parties, all who wish to participate in the market in the region, free of charge. And so www.greenbondtransparency.org. And so we need to collaborate. That's why in Brazil, we continue to deepen our partnership with ABDE, our long-standing partnership, and also sharing knowledge and supporting Brazilian development institutions. We've also been working with individual members of ABDE, such as the NDS and the Minas Gerais Development Bank, for structuring PPPs and also financing and promoting job generation and sustainable infrastructure concessions. Also, the launching of sustained or sustainable bonds. And so I would like to reinforce that this kind of partnership, I'd also like to acknowledge Carlos and many other partners that we have with us today. We really believe that this kind of partnership is a very efficient way for us to leverage future trends and get Brazil to recover, as well as the whole region, in a more resilient manner, more robust manner, more sustainable manner. And so, once again, thanking ABDE for the opportunity and my panel colleagues also for the invitation. And we are entirely at your service in order to deepen this partnership. Thank you very much. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you for your presentation, very constructive, showing the current scenario, also the post-COVID scenario, and the green bonds and social protection, attention to employment and inclusion. Very rich presentation. Thank you. I'd like to give the floor now to Carlos Pinto, who is the Brazilian representative in Brazil of IFC. Carlos, the floor is yours. Thank you, André. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank ABDE for the opportunity and greet my colleagues here and the audience. I will try to be brief and colloquial in my presentation. The points that I'd like to highlight are related to the relevance, the importance of the private sector, increasingly reinforced now in Brazil, a topic that is essential and cross-cutting. It's what we need, everything we need to do from now on is related to sustainability. And it is up to all of us to keep this in mind and to apply it in our everyday lives. As Morgan said, we are not competitors. We are entities operating in the same space, collaborating towards the same cause. And so we need to use these synergies to support countries, in this case, Brazil. And I'd like to highlight that it will be the private sector that will. We all know very well the problems Brazil faces. All the diagnoses have been made, and the gaps in infrastructure, low productivity, social inequality, public expenditure that lacks efficiency, the problems brought about by urbanization, the issues related to social capital, especially education and health, demography, the growth of the Brazilian population. It's something that needs to be tackled as well. And lastly, the fact that Brazil contains 1/3 of the forests of the world, an extremely valuable asset. Now, looking at the impact of COVID, we see that these numerous problems have increased in their importance and magnitude. And this is the point I wanted to arrive at, to say that Brazil has a unique opportunity. All of us here need to be players in the positive transformation of Brazil. Brazil has at its reach what the British call leapfrog opportunity, with a possible leap forward at the global level. Now, I'd like to share a dream that I try to materialize through my responsibility at IFC. I'd like to imagine a Brazil leading the championship of sustainability. Why shouldn't Brazil be a world leader in terms of sustainability? I think it's possible. And I think the private sector is already and will increasingly play a huge role in this opportunity. And I'm calling this BBB, the Build Back Better concept. So we will build on what we already had. And so under the acronym BBB, Build Back Better, we will place Brazil back on the path of sustainable development. At IFC, we call climate financing climate business. It might seem heretic to some ears, some sensitive ears. Climate can be a business. And can climate be a business? Yes. If it's not a business, nothing will happen. We need to know how to turn opportunities related to climate change and all related sustainability issues into a win-win situation for all parties involved. It's a simple idea. No doubt a country needs to have legislation and regulation characterizing all these sustainability aspects. But this on its own is not enough. Today, Brazil already has advanced institutionality and regulation that is considered quite advanced and innovative. However, this is not enough. What's missing? Precisely, a change in culture, a change in the culture of the private sector. It's the private sector that needs to push for change and needs to be engaged in this revolution and huge transformation. Without the private sector on board, nothing will happen. It's not through fines or obligations, imposition of obligations, that this will happen. It will happen with a commitment on the part of the private sector with the changes that need to happen. IFC is a strategic partner because we have this capacity to work with the private sector. We've been doing this since 1956, when we provided the first credit in Brazil. Since then, the only year that IFC was not present, even in the most difficult years, we've been engaged with the private sector in Brazil. And what we are doing today is very different from what we have done in the past. I can see participants and representatives of regional development banks. We could start there. A big difference in relation to the past. We work with the private sector, but we are open to working with regional development banks and Brazilian banks, helping them in this mission of sustainable development, both from the perspective of providing support and also helping in terms of investments. And so when these development banks have projects related to sustainability and wish to improve their competencies in these areas, we, IFC, can be a strategic partner. We already are. We are already working with a small number of development banks, the regional development banks here in Brazil, helping them with the agenda of creating conditions to support investments that can be characterized as sustainable.
We are also working, such as our colleagues from ABDE, in the area of green products. A lot is going to happen through this, and through credit to private sector, this revolution will materialize because banks will be more and more in the investors, with the investors and capital markets, and they will prefer working with products that ensure sustainability criteria. And this brings about transparency, avoiding greenwashing. We need to be truthful in this, credible things with transparency. That's how we're going to be able to provide for these changes. So very much welcome this IADB initiative. Brazil has something fantastic, a very much developed financial capital, financial market with several players, and it is great to have transition bonds, green bonds, etc., and several products being developed throughout the world, especially in Asia. And this investment already has a favorable yield. It is cheaper to finance through green bonds than through corporate bonds. We want for Brazil to have that too, and companies will be able to see that they can accede to capital that is cheaper if they are sustainable. We are working actively with public-private partnerships. We need to bring private investment to areas where typically used to use public investment. And we will need to channel these resources carefully to areas where no private resources exist. So Brazilian government will need to prioritize where public resources are channeled to. But it is also a great opportunity to open for investors, national and international investors who are looking at Brazil, such as we can see happening in the water and sanitation areas. So it's a huge field of opportunities for the private sector to be able to contribute in a positive manner to this infrastructure gap to be overcome as fast as possible. Therefore, IFC is very active. We have a team for the structuring of PPPs, I beg pardon. We have partnerships with municipalities, government institutions, precisely to help in this mission. I'd like to reiterate, I do beg a pardon for this mantra, but my mantra is sustainability, sustainability, sustainability. And then the private sector being an engine, a drive for a movement supported by institutions such as ours, but bringing its efficiency and knowledge to help Brazil take this leap. Thank you all very much. I am at your service. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you for the participation. It is essential. It's not important. But I'll give the floor to Mr. Nelson. Well, good morning. First, I'd like to thank ABDE for the invitation and also the participation of all of you in this very excellent panel. We have little time, and our colleague Édson spoke so well about new technologies in research and in innovation in an area that is so important to Brazil, and that made Brazil a power in this area. Some decades of studies and development, and Édson spoke very well about it, representing Embrapa in this country. And today our trade balance depends a lot on this sector. We have credit that is linked or that is earmarked to this sector in a partnership with the Secretariat for Agriculture in our state. We call it here in the state of São Paulo, covering over R$500 million. So thank you, Édson, for this presentation. And Uzi Scheffer, it was great to hear you, and I know that SOSA is a very well reputed country, I beg your pardon, company, and we know the importance of IT in this country. In the first and second presentations, we can see new technologies at the service of better delivery and performance, especially taking into account that it is much better for companies and it will bring impact to the quality of life of people, because productivity, companies doing well, generating income, but also bringing well-being to countries that are developing. And Mr. Morgan Doyle and also Carlos Pinto, they are both two great partners, the IADB and the IFC, which is the financial arm of the World Bank. I really liked when Morgan said or spoke about the importance of us needing to do more. So we are doing that. We would need public and private and the $14 billion. And I really liked the fact that these dialogues with institutional or financial institutions, I beg your pardon, they go through the union of countries, of the gathering of countries. This is great, Morgan. I would like to say that it starts with the gathering of states. Here, and an analogy with our country. The national foment institutions linked to ABDE, etc. We are championing work that involves all these needs, especially liquidity of companies in the country because of the economic impact of the pandemics. They developed something very important that was very that was essential for ensuring the permanence of companies, especially also to maintain employment and income. And Morgan, I'd like to thank for the great support, and especially the state of São Paulo, by the IADB. And I'd like to extend that to IFC too, because we do have contracts with them. We have been working with them too, and we have resources for innovation, and this whole work is permeated by something we defend here at the Bank of São Paulo, which is sustainability. Brazil is a continental-sized country, and it needs more than ever to champion sustainability in our country, and São Paulo has been doing that too. I believe that through raising awareness among private sectors, we're going to be able to have the great resumption. The green bonds will make a difference and provide better conditions to companies, people, and investors.
So at the São Paulo, Desenvolve São Paulo, we have a program geared towards sustainability. Companies and the ISG and all the things we've been doing in the context of planning that takes into consideration especially all or making families or allowing families and people to have better quality of life and longevity through climate preservation for future generations. Because today it's our responsibility. I'd like to conclude saying that we could start by bringing together the representatives of companies. In this panel, you don't even need the whole ABDE forum. BID, IDB, IFC, the AgeRio, and Embrapa, and SOSA. I have no doubt that this would create a virtuous cycle. And I would like to end with a word that is related to synergy. Synergy, it's about joining efforts so that our missions as companies can be effectively made tangible towards a better world, a better country, a better São Paulo, which is the state that I represent here. Thank you. Thank you, Nelson, for your timely comments. I'd like to immediately give the floor to the president of AgeRio, André. André, you have the floor. Good morning. Thank you, ABDE, for the invitation to join this forum. We have more modest figures, a little more modest than Desenvolve São Paulo. We are also open to conversation with organizations and to think of ways to improve development in the state of Rio de Janeiro. We, in the past, had a good experience with IDB in terms of guaranteeing funds and guaranteeing sustainable operations here, especially in the photovoltaic area. We're trying to resume this. We've already had a round of meetings. I will speak more generally. We are focused on the program Supera Rio. It's an emergency support program for small and medium companies. We are making this operational, but back to the main topic, we have the perspective of sustainable technological transformation of the state. We know how important it is to support technological innovation and creative solutions in a society that is strongly impacted. I'd like to highlight some actions in sustainable technological development. Since 2013, we've had a partnership with Finep, generating excellent opportunities for huge entrepreneurs. A recent partnership with FAPEG, which is a research support foundation for the development of innovative projects for micro and small companies. We know how difficult it is for micro and small companies to access attractive credit, and this is mixed with subvention. Explaining this partnership with FAPEG, FAPEG provides stimulus in the area of innovation in the form of subvention. We also work with financing resources, and up to now we've already entered 10 contracts with a total of 6 million reais, and we are going to launch a second call for proposals soon and in support of startups in Rio de Janeiro. So the synergy with FAPEG is very important. We are stimulating an innovation environment in Rio de Janeiro. And lastly, we also have a strategy to strengthen the interior of the state. We are training agents through agreements with the municipal governments, kind of bridging or addressing our lack of capillarity. So we went from 50 to 400 operations a month with micro and small companies, very important during the pandemic. And so the local impact of our development actions, very important. We want to replicate this in other municipalities. I'm being very brief, and I'd like to wish you all a great forum and thank ABDE.
So thank you, André, for the excellent overview of the development scenario in the state of Rio de Janeiro and how AgeRio contributes to the state's development. The theme is so rich that it's hard to keep to the time allocated to each presentation. I'd love to continue the discussion much longer, but due to time constraints, we will have to skip the final remarks. We'll have to conclude our session. But I'd like to thank Édson Bolfe for the overview on agri-tech, agriculture and livestock, and how technology impacts this key sector for the country. I'd like to thank Uzi Scheffer, CEO of SOSA, for presenting a world overview of the most disruptive technologies and how they can impact and help businesses around the world. I'd like to thank Morgan Doyle, IDB representative in Brazil, for addressing the issue of sustainability and how it interferes in business and how important this is for us to develop the country economically and socially. Thank you to Carlos Pinto, Brazil manager of the International Finance Corporation, for addressing the role of the private sector in the post-COVID recovery, a scenario in which sustainability becomes even more relevant. And thank the commentators Nelson de Souza, president of Desenvolve São Paulo, representing this institution which is so important for the country, for the state of São Paulo, and for Brazil as well, and the recent initiatives of Desenvolve São Paulo in the state of São Paulo. And lastly, André Verde for the overview on the State Development Agency of Rio de Janeiro, AgeRio, and the role of the agency in the development of the state of Rio de Janeiro. Finally, I'd like to thank everyone, concluding our panel and wishing you all a pleasant afternoon.